Great, I'm delighted to be here, and just to draw attention to before, you cannot hack my notes, okay? They're illegible to most people, as my students know. I'm going to talk about health security. So we spent this morning talking a lot about state security and cybersecurity, but I'm going to talk about how can health security be both global and secure. And basically, I divide it into 3 different sections. The first one briefly mentions that you can talk about health security as a tech issue as well as a critical infrastructure issue, but I'm going to focus on democracy and citizenship. The second section talks more about how we need to look at human security as an answer partly to what Julie talked about this morning in terms of defining and defending our values. And the third part is to introduce a definition, I'm not an academic for nothing, a new definition that takes these issues into account in health security in the 21st century. So basically, you can talk about health security as a medical issue, as access to medicine, as providing medicine, but the problem with that is you can also, medicalization of security can take away from individual liberty, okay? I just want to leave that out there. The second point is the issue of health security as part of critical infrastructure. As we heard this morning, you can have cyber attacks on various elements of our democratic society, including hospitals, okay? Including the chaos that's caused by the shutdown of public services, including just traffic lights. Again, a technological issue that we can talk about as well. The second part is the human focus. It's not an accident that in 1994, after the end of the Cold War, there was a shift, or at least for the moment, the unipolar shift to, from the Iron Curtain to what was for a while called the Golden Curtain, instead of the East and West division, to a North-South division in terms of security prioritization. It was also the introduction of human security in the UNDP report. It was, there was a big emphasis on what we heard a little bit this morning, the broadening of the idea of security. So not just state or physical security, but to include health, food, environmental security, political rights. And these haven't really gone away, but we've sort of moved again, I would argue, away from discussing what they mean and what these values are worth and how much they're worth and how we defend them, to talking about how the process of defending, and we're losing a little bit of sight of what the defense actually should be. What you could see, though, is the arrival of these issues in the HIV and AIDS epidemic. You saw the fight for human rights and health security actually brought to the UN Security Council. There was a medical response, there was a political response, there was a civil society response, and you could see the trajectory move in the Ebola crisis, where the question was no longer asked, do people have human rights to health anymore? It was mostly asked, how can we deliver those rights? I'm not arguing that it was equitable in that case, okay, that everyone who had Ebola or was in danger of getting it was treated equally. So don't get me wrong, but you saw a shift in the discourse of rights, security, and human security. Now, however, you could argue that we're moving back to a multipolar world where this is changing again. And a lot of these broad securities that we talked about in the 90s, mid-2000s, are again being subsumed in a nationalistic security debate. Thank you for the warning. And now we have Germany, for instance, and South Africa on the Security Council. And this could be an opportunity to have a new definition of health security, not to lose this. And I would argue you need health security that looks at the population, and that looks at a population also across borders, that is flexible enough to include different kinds of threats, okay? This means that if migrants or refugees are moving across borders and don't have access to health services, and someone either in country already, so a citizen, or externally gets measles, polio, HIV, or anything else, it's in the population interest, whether it's mobile or sedentary, to have access to the healthcare system in the interest of health security for all. Because basically at the end we know that health, including other cyber threats, doesn't have borders, and is not always attributable. So basically keeping that in mind, I would argue that health security gives us an insight into some of the new security threats that we're looking at, and that they're beyond borders, and that it shouldn't fall prey to the reemergence of multipolar power politics. Thank you.